You're about to enter into Monica's universe, where her inquiry may align you to new dimensions. You're about to cross a threshold into the unknown. Surrender to the experience. The split. Am I missing the boat? Turning conflict into a garden. Quote, time forks perpetually towards innumerable futures. Jorge Luis Borges, The Garden of Forking Paths. End of quote. In Borges' story, Ts'ui Pên attempts to write a novel and build a labyrinth. Everyone assumes that the novel is chaotic and the labyrinth is never completed. The revelation is that they are the same thing, because the labyrinth is the novel and the novel is not linear. One storyline does not exclude the others, but every possible outcome occurs. In one version of reality, a character kills someone. In another one, he is killed. In another one, both survive. Realities do not cancel each other. They exist in different timelines. So there is no point in feeling that I'm missing the boat, because time is always working perpetually. There is no one boat. There are different trajectories. An alignment determines which branch I may inhabit or I may not. Sometimes in one's life, someone appears first as a person, perhaps a mentee, a friend, a lover, another kind of relationship. Yet, with time, the deeper symbolism of their arrival begins to reveal itself. What once seemed like an ordinary connection gradually discloses an archetypal layer, a role within the architecture of memory and meaning. When that realization arrives, something beautiful occurs. The symbol becomes lived reality. Even if paths diverge and the two never meet again and hear from one another, the encounter has already delivered its frequency, opening a new field of perception and possibility. For that reason, I remain grateful to a few people in my life who have served precisely that purpose. And if you're reading this, you know who you are. The ignition of a flame that, instead of consuming itself, guides the inner path and integrates what was once forgotten. We carry soul contracts with many. Some resolve and dissolve. Some become transparent, and others validate. Those that remain are pathways to integrate, and I remain grateful. People I once held very high in terms of integrity have been revealing themselves over the past weeks and months. Many influencers are simply showing who they really are and what they truly care about. It has been fascinating to watch, almost like balloons popping in a room full of cactuses, one after another. The image dissolves, and what remains is the person. At the same time, I recognize that I am also revealing myself more openly. Some of you may not resonate with me anymore, and that is perfectly fine. This is not about better or worse. It is not a moral judgment. It is about integrity. When a person, an idea, or a situation is no longer aligned with me, I simply stop following it. Nothing dramatic, just clarity. And honestly, I love this moment in time. It feels refreshing. The masks fall, people stand where they truly are, and from there, we can choose our direction with much greater awareness. The split. What I see is a split so defined, it is already divided. It runs through conversations, cutting through attention, challenging any motivation. The split shows up through the way people orient themselves in the world. One can perceive it before one can articulate it is as something entering the field, and the body can feel it immediately. The signals could be expressing a subtle tightening in the chest or a slight acceleration in the mind. As perception sharpens, the nervous system registers the divergence way before language catches up. The split is energetic. Like a wavelength, it shows up in how attention is directed, responding also in how value is woven, at times how authority is embodied or applied. Some movements may be felt amplifying while saturating. Others may feel withdrawing and falling deep within. I noticed some could accelerate towards visibility or shyly refine coherence in smaller bands of resonance. Both currents circulate at the same time, and the field holds them simultaneously, spaciously. It is interesting how perception makes things absolutely different and how people are discerning and sometimes judging what they see based on their own expectations and projections. Obviously, we are creating this new reality, but a lot of it is a hall of mirrors. And this hall of mirrors is horrific because we just came out of 15 years of complete delusion. This hall of mirrors is so vast that it allows our lives to be reflected inside ourselves. Within each of us, there is also a horror of mirrors. The sensation resembles standing at a river delta. From above, the water divides into multiple channels. Each branch carries movement forward while separating gradually from the others. The difference between those channels becomes visible only after some distance has passed. The planet Pluto, the archetype of evolution, speaks differently through each generation. Those like me born in the mid-60s with Pluto conjunct Uranus in Virgo may have ruptured systems through discernment and analysis. During the time while we were born, institutions were critiqued, carrying the frequency that all frameworks need to be examined and possibly exposing inefficiencies. The question becomes, can they be changed? Or shall we surrender to the ocean of, it is not my responsibility to fix all broken parts, and let them dissolve? There is an evolutionary necessity here to surrender the drive for perfection, to accept that some things cannot be fixed through analysis and must instead be allowed to dissolve into the Piscean ocean. The funny joke was that the protesters, the rebels then, became the yuppies and established a new order exactly opposite of what they were against at the beginning of the 80s. I see that a lot recently, how the split lives within us, that part that is a blind spot where we cannot really see ourselves for how we are, but as a projection of what we would like to become. The irony. Transiting Pluto in Aquarius now forms an unconjunct to the Virgo signature, forcing a recalibration of the impulse to critique systems and asking what we will actually do with the knowledge we have gained. The millennials. There is a cohort that often acts as a bridge into this generational pattern. Individuals born between November 1985 and early 1986 carry a rare configuration with Pluto conjunct the South Node in Scorpio. Many of them arrived with an instinctive awareness of hidden power structures. Sun points towards Taurus, towards stability, embodiment, and value. In many ways, they stand at the threshold between the older cycles and the Capricornian generation that followed, sensing the collapse of power structures before the larger generational confrontation with institutions fully emerged. Carrying the South Node in Scorpio, they possess a cellular memory of how power corrupts. They are the guardians of the gate who must choose between seeing through the hall of mirrors or simply building a more sophisticated one. History resonates across time. My life direction, my MC, sits at 13 degrees of Scorpio, which is the exact coordinate where Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune form a triple conjunction in the year 1307. The world remembers 1307 as the year Dante Alighieri began his descent into the Inferno. It was also the year of the spiritual architecture of the West was etched into the collective degree of Scorpio. On Friday, October 13, 1307, King Philip IV of France arrested the Knights Templar and destroyed one of the most powerful and secretive institutions in history. This event gave name to the famous Friday the 13th. It remains a primary symbol for intense, transformative, and shadowy power dynamics. I work with harmonics and frequencies because I can hear the interference pattern between the medieval reset and our own. Sitting on my MC is the fixed star Alpheka, the jewel in the crown. In the ancient sky, Alpheka represents a sovereignty born out of exile, a crown that isn't granted by an institution. It is found only after one has been stripped of earthly status. Much like Dante in 1307, my moon at 12 Scorpio sits right next to this point, and because my moon is balsamic with Neptune, I carry a specific porous sensitivity to those undercurrents. This Neptune moon signature is a vital part of my chart. It allows me to perceive the dissolving of the old world before it physically happens. By 1989 and 1993, this energy returned in a stretch alignment in Capricorn, seating the millennial generation with a similar task. But where Dante had to build the map, my work with harmonics and points is to decipher it. With my Jupiter at 3 degrees of Taurus exactly meeting Dante's Uranus at 3 degrees of Taurus, I find myself amplifying the frequency of a 700-year-old aha moment, translating that silent architecture into the resonant frequency of the next cycle. The irony of the current split is that many are waiting for the system to validate their exit from it. They're seeking a crown of recognition from the very hall of mirrors they claim to despise. People born during this 1989 to 1993 window arrived during an unusual moment when Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune were all forming conjunction cycles in Capricorn. That configuration carries a heavy inheritance around institutional systems. In 1989, Saturn and Neptune met in Capricorn 3 times. The final conjunction on November 9, the day the wall fell. Pluto in Scorpio squared the Aquarius-Leo nodal axis. Structures thinned, authority lost density, borders dissolved. Souls born in that window carry autonomy and longing braided together. They question inherited systems while seeking recognition within a collective frame. The geometry was set at inception. This accordion effect is actually more powerful than a single meeting. It means that the architecture, Saturn, was laid first, then the vision, Neptune, was seated, and finally the revolution, Uranus, electrified it in 1993. The frequency shifted when Uranus moved in to meet Neptune exactly where Saturn had just stood, locking in the energy of that specific degree. What I see in many of them now is a split that feels strangely familiar. Some speak against the system, critique it, reject it, even mock it. Yet at the same time, they seek recognition inside the very structures they claim to resist. The rebellion becomes almost theatrical. The language is radical, but the desire underneath is still to belong to the structure that is being criticized. For Pluto in Scorpio Soul, the lesson is not about holding power, but about giving their life a value that connects to materiality through the soul. Their evolution lies in the Taurus polarity, finding a grounded, steady worth that doesn't rely on the drama of the underworld. It reminds me of what happened with my own generation. The protesters of the late 60s eventually became the yuppies of the 80s, establishing a new order that looked suspiciously like the one they once rejected. The irony repeats itself, so when I watch this younger cohort moving through their mid-30s, I see the same inner fracture appearing again. The question is not whether the system is broken. The question is whether a person is willing to transform themselves enough to live outside of the structures they criticize. This is another moment worth noting between February and June of 1994, when the North Node joined Pluto in Scorpio. This passage deepened the intensity already seeded by the Capricorn alignments. Pluto with the North Node concentrates evolutionary pressure, pulling collective attention towards themes of power, survival, and transformation. Souls arriving under the sky carrying a sensitivity to the undercurrents of control and the hidden dynamics that shape collective life. This period also unfolded while the new Uranus-Neptune cycle in Capricorn was still fresh, a cycle that had opened only a year earlier and was still imprinting its vision into the collective field. Uranus awakens new possibilities. Neptune dissolves the boundaries of old paradigms. Together, they introduce an entirely new ideological atmosphere. With Saturn standing on the threshold of Pisces, the transition from Capricorn structures into the oceanic field of Pisces introduced what evolutionary astrology often describes as a skip step when the nodes of the moon square Saturn. The pressure was to confront the deeper emotional and spiritual consequences of what those systems have created. Those born in that interval often carry an acute awareness that transformation is unavoidable. They sense both the collapse of inherited structures and the necessity of rebuilding value from a more authentic foundation. Their task is not merely stuck in rebellion nor focused on reform. It is the capacity to pass through the underworld of collective power and emerge with a more grounded relationship to a responsible embodiment of value. Gen Zs. After Pluto in Scorpio came the Pluto in Sagittarius. A very interesting set of characters are coming of age right now. Pluto in Sagittarius is looking for a kind of truth. At one point, they had Chiron conjunct Pluto in the early 2000s, so they carry this vulnerability about what is real or not. They arrive here seemingly powerless regarding established wisdom. Yet their journey is one of total surrender to the Pluto polarity point in Gemini. They must yield to the small details and the immediate facts rather than getting lost in the big scheme or grand ideologies. Their wisdom comes forth only when they stop trying to find the one big truth and start listening to the many small ones. I'm looking forward to them coming of age because they're bringing forth so much wisdom. Saturn in Taurus squares both Neptune and Uranus in Aquarius, creating a crisis of what personal value shapes while the collective innovates. While they want to innovate and belong to the future, their Saturn in Taurus demands to know, how does this actually sustain me? What is the tangible cost? It prevents them from becoming more digital ghosts and forces them to build something that actually has weight. In that sense, the geometry continues the pattern already visible in the generations surrounding them. The confrontation between institutions and authenticity, between inherited authority and lived truth. The split becomes visible again, this time expressed through the tension between power and value, between survival instincts and the possibility of building something more coherent in their place. And like the labyrinth of Borges' story, the future does not unfold in a single direction. It divides into paths, and each generation steps into a branch it chooses to inhabit. Virality. Give me your attention. Around 15 years ago, another shift occurred. Neptune entered Pisces while Uranus shifted to Aries, the same sign where both Saturn and Neptune are today. The whole architecture of attention changed. Facebook bought Instagram, and the birth of the insufferable influencers began. What a tedious word. To influence means to have power over someone or something. Yet the influencer who propagates messages is in a constant battle for attention. One has to look back at Edward Bernays and know that all we receive is the program you tune into. YouTube is you tune. What are all those wavelengths signaling to the unconscious? Digesting meaningless media that has been dumped, in my case, just sitting down and doing nothing if I don't have a creative idea to put my energy into. Even listening to me is a discernment practice. I don't blame any of you who disconnect from my content seriously. Social media platforms created a system where visibility became a primary measure of existence. Posts circulate at the speed of light, rapidly mixing images with opinions and fake gurus selling their latest trick. The mechanisms that determine what is seen and what is amplified becomes increasingly automated. We think we have to beat the algorithm, but you are the algorithm. It is your attention they need. Instagram for me now is my shopping mall because I just do a search anywhere and within seconds I will have endless choices. The joke has always been on us. The consumer is being consumed like charcoal in a barbecue. New habits stem in the collective mind. Dumb scrolling replaced any kind of inner reflection. Reactionary troops enlisted to poke all the bears, and the metabolism clogged our body and spirits, replacing proper digestion. The number one casualty? The nervous system, as it learned to react to stimulation rather than to pause and observe. Time is of the essence, an aphorism recalls. Metrics and attention become fragmented across many signals arriving at the same time. Oof, I'm tired even typing about the collective gaslighting. All the effects of this subtle yet powerful shift extended beyond communication. The mere structure of perception itself adapted to the rhythm of the feed, sucking attention and inducing sleep through hypnotic messages. Have you ever been in a hypnotherapy session? That is how I quit smoking back in 2003. Powerful shit. Alas, most people who call themselves reactionaries against the machine are just pushing one side of the split. And reality integration is much harder than it seems, as the tail of what we are fighting for comes back as a mouth that will eat us alive like the Ouroboros. Content that provoked immediate emotional activation moved further and faster. Content that required time and concentration moved more slowly. The field of our appetite and hunger rewarded intensity and immediacy. Virality began to function as a sorting mechanism for collective attention. What spreads like marmalade becomes obvious to your perceptive field. Now, quite narrowed by habit. A video 5 minutes long? That's too long, man. What remains quiet disappears from the surface of the conversation even when its depth is greater. How can I know what I'm missing if visibility and value drifted apart inside this environment? This transformation of attention prepared the ground for the next layer of technological acceleration. Compliance was so easy. Get inside. You're guilty of being alive for stating your inalienable rights. Shame on you for having a voice that doesn't cohere with the narrative. It is not they versus I. It is why on earth am I afraid of making my own decisions? Don't blame it on the media or the propaganda. Look within. If you complied, what was your biggest fear then? And if you had not been that ignorant, would you have chosen differently? Systems that track individual and collective behavior and optimize distribution operate continuously. They measure response patterns and adjust what appears on the screen. The individual experiences the result as a flow of information, while underneath that flow, algorithms organize the movement of attention across millions of people at once. You're allowing this to happen by being unaware. I have seen it myself. I've seen how much I have shifted in the last year. My body no longer reacts automatically under viral streams that are programmed by others. I pause. I take time to feel how my nervous system responds. If my body feels like a vomit emoji, I do not continue. I do not respond. I let the message be. I do not have to interact. If my body responds with something like a jumping emoji, even then I pause, because I want to make sure that the response of joy is coming from within and is not simply something expected of me. Agency, finally. Biological reactivity. The nervous system is being consumed by this transformation. Constant stimulation leaves a physical footprint. High velocity information triggers ancient survival circuits. This locks the sympathetic nervous system into a state of high alert. The body receives danger signals from information alone. It sustains a state of readiness that finds no resolution. Fear and outrage travel at the speed of data that carries them. These emotional responses move through the body as rapidly as code. They are fueled by biological pathways designed for life or death survival. Perception and reaction have become a single field. Human beings are surrendering agency to those rhythms. and evenly spaced systems with no stop indicators lacks retardation points. Energy runs straight until it consumes itself. These viral agents operate without a gap. They lack a place to receive a conscious shock. Advanced models contain an internal tension built into their architecture. Competing forces check each other and create unnecessary friction. This internal friction prevents the system from eating itself. Every structure requires these stop binders to prevent degeneration. The internal question. All of these layers converge within the individual. The fork of time, the split in interpretation, generational imprint, attention architecture, biological response, and technological delegation form a simple field of experience. Each person navigates this environment through choices that accumulate gradually. Attention directs perception, perception informs interpretation, and interpretation guides action. The question that began quietly returns again. Am I missing the boat? The question does not refer to belonging to a group or adopting a position. It refers to orientation. Within a field where many currents move simultaneously, orientation determines how experience unfolds. The fork exists. The channels of movement are visible. Each person encounters them in their own time and through their own awareness. Am I missing the boat? Am I on the right side of the shore? Do I have to move to the other shore? Do I have to trust the boat? Do I have to trust the wind? Where am I going to be? These are questions that I am deeply feeling these days as the planet of transformation, the planet of evolution that moves slowly. 250 years per turn is already touching my ascendant and is helping me reshape my identity, Pluto. And I am in between things. It is beautiful coincidence that Saturn and Neptune conjunction at 0 degrees in Aries is also happening at the same time. It is a synchronistic moment in which I am redefining my personal view of reality at the same time that the world is. I will trust that boat. I will trust the light. I will trust the wind and the sails. While Pluto is in Aquarius, we will identify our relationship to the collective from the point of view of our solar part. Where can we be joyful? How can we fulfill our purpose and our light within a collective? Because that is going to transfigure the field. The last time Pluto was in Aquarius was during the American Revolution. Before that, it was in the mid 1500s when the church broke into. Before that, it was around the time following the Crusades, during Dante's life. There is another point of resonance here. Uranus hit 3 degrees of Taurus on March 2020 and clicked into the exact degrees of Dante's birth. This movement disrupted the world. The scandemic was the trigger that forced the collective to face the same descent Dante faced. A loss of the known world, an exile from the normal life, and the sudden realization that our structures were not stable as we believed. My Jupiter sits at the same degree. Its Sabian symbol, a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, always shows me the patterns connect. This placement grants me the vision to see the wealth of meaning hidden within the chaos of the descent. Vita Nuova. Quote, in that part of the book of my memory before which little can be read, there is a rubric which says, Incipit Vita Nuova. Here begins the new life. Dante Alighieri, Vita Nuova. By the way, Dante was 27 years old when he wrote this. It is beautiful to know that he was looking backwards in order to go forward with the orientation of his life, as he was reaching his nodal opposition. This is where the axis of past and future becomes visible, as the individual stands between the direction already taken and the direction that still asks to unfold. And we are at that point of civilization where we're looking before and after to connect the dots, to make sense, to reconnect to love, hoping, like Dante, that the forward arrow will have love rule everyone's soul. Perhaps we could code Vita Nuova, a new life. Am I missing the boat, orientation becomes the compass. Quote, Polemos is the father of all things and the king of all, Heraclitus, end of quote. For Heraclitus, this refers to the generative tension within reality itself. It is the dynamic through which differences emerge and order appears. Conflict, in this sense, reveals distinctions. It brings hidden structures into visibility and produces transformation. Within the philosophical frame, Polemos names the force through which differences become visible and through which new arrangements of reality take shape. I began writing this article on March 2nd. I could not finish it at the moment. So today I returned to it and allowed the thread to complete itself. Have a great week. It's equinox this week.